The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are the speaker's own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of Atlas Chiropractic Center of Eskin Arbor, Michigan, Largent Media, or any of their affiliates or subsidiaries. The material and information presented in this podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Should you need medical attention or advice, seek out a licensed medical professional or facility in your area. The Tapping Into Uncomfortable with Reade Hubert DC name and all forms and abbreviations are the property of its owner, and its use does not imply endorsement of or opposition to any specific organization, product, or service.
Welcome to Tapping Into Uncomfortable, the podcast, or the health podcast that doesn't make any sense. It's like a headlock from an older cousin that gives you mental noogies. The only way out is to scream, "The riff!" You know what? That was so good that it's time for Tapping Into Uncomfortable, a double riff. Oh, well, today is we're going to do a little bit of Christmas celebration here because it's December. I'm going to take a little bit of time off in December, and we're going to go into January, and we will pick it up where we crazily left off. So I'm going to look at Santa Claus from a diagnosis standpoint and point out a couple things. And I believe Santa has rosacea, the red cheeks. I believe Santa Claus has diabetes type 2. Numerous joint problems. That's why the reindeer need to carry him. But also, very important, that falls into Tapping Into Uncomfortable, and I hope he's listening, is ultra-processed food addiction. I believe the big man's got that. And finally, we need to confront his forced labor issues. Okay, people, this podcast has no major structure other than it's going to be called Hodgepodge. It's the boiled dinner of podcasting. We're just going to throw everything together and you'll see what happens. This is the stuff that made it to the cutting room floor. And so what we're going to do, we're going to take it, make a hodgepodge. It's going to be a little bit of structure, but not much to it. And what we're going to do is we'll be switching topics until we get our 20 minutes in. Now we're going to get in the DeLorean and we're going to go back. We're going to go back to November 19th, 1863.
Fourscore and 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth to this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal.
Why did I do that? I did that because I did a very poor recto-sigmoid contents job on essentialism and confirmation bias in the previous podcast. The reason why is because you really need to understand this because you're going to see this the rest of your life because these two words are so huge for human interactions and race relations, believe it or not. These are two things that actually drive, as I said in the last podcast, some of these things. And you're going to see it. And at the end of this podcast, you'll actually see where that fits in on what's going on today. Part of Tapping Into Uncomfortable University, our history department wanted a female voice. Here's the reason why. Abraham Lincoln, they believed from historical documents, had a very high kind of squeaky voice, kind of nervous. However, other people also have come out and said that they believe that he was a great orator. So at this point, the only thing we have in the historical doctrine is that he kind of had a high-pitched voice. Because of the fact that if you look at Abraham Lincoln and you look at his body, we're really big on the 4 T's, thoughts, toxins, trauma, and traits, that he had potentially had a genetic disorder called Marfan syndrome. So if you look at him and you realize that our 16th presidents may have had Marfan syndrome, and what does that mean? And last but not least, a singer from a metal band that I really enjoyed had to retire because he had Marfan syndrome and he underwent a lot of pain. So for those of you who want to look it up, it's a genetic disorder that involves connective tissue in the body. It causes these people a lot of pain, but it also makes them look taller and longer. Let's get dirty because this is Hodgepodge. This is such a crazy thing. So we're going to talk about essential and confirmation bias again and how it actually makes sense now. So the blue report, I call it that. that would be on COVID-19 came out, and it pretty much said business as usual. We really didn't find anything new from during COVID-19 and the pandemic. And that's the way it was. Well, just recently, another conflicting report, I'm going to call it the Red Report, came out. Now, when this new report came out, a bunch of people jumped on the bandwagon and started pointing fingers at the Blue Report. See, I told you so. I'm not crazy. This is actually what happened. These are opinion papers, folks. And what happens is the majority of us, once again, get caught in the middle. So it depends on what you want to believe. So here's another one for you, talking about essentialism, which is you can't play in my yard unless you look like me and think like me. So where do you stand on this? Are you a vaxxer or are you an anti-vaxxer? So a vaxxer relies on science, and what they do is they take in all the science and they start pointing their finger at the anti-vaxxers who uses their science against them. So when it comes to healthcare and it comes to these policies, we have all these things set up and they're getting worse and they're getting more separated in between. And once again, you and I are getting lost. Well, let's look at one of the COVID-19 vaccination issues. We scientifically know, and they agreed that heart inflammation with males in their 20s, and they still don't know fully why it was males, and usually in their 20s, we're getting heart inflammation from the vaccination. They know this, they agreed with it, but they said, look, having heart inflammation for a small amount of time isn't as bad as you getting COVID. Therefore, at this point, until we figure out what's going on, it's okay. And then what did the anti-vaxxers do? They started to point their fingers. What you got to watch when we get into this is, because this word vaccination is going to be used a lot in the next 6 months, the anti-vaxxers then will use that, extrapolate that. Now, when people cannot explain something, instead of going, I don't know, we tend to start to make things make sense to ourselves. And out comes the conspiracy theories. So in my practice, I had to listen to the conspiracy theories on the other side. But at the end of the day, folks, blue and red makes purple. And purple, my friends, is the color of royalty. So I recommend, why not be purple? But keep your eyes open for essentialism and confirmation bias. We finally sat down at Tapanui Company University because this is Hodgepodge, which means that whatever tends to come out today is going to come out. And we're going to laugh and giggle. Some of this isn't going to make a ton of sense because it's not going to fit, but that's Hodgepodge. We decided to come up with a mathematical equation because what they're looking for now is a mathematical equation that makes the world make sense. So the theory of relativity by Einstein. And by the way, Albert Einstein was a patent clerk. Do you know why Albert Einstein was a patent clerk and came up with these great theories of relativity, which was one of them? He ran up against essentialism. He was Jewish. Because he was Jewish, getting a patent clerk position was pretty much all you could get in Germany at that time. We're going to come up with our own equation of all things. So we sat down, mathematics department, we finally came up with it. And then here it is for the rest of your life. This is your belief system when it comes to health, vaccinations, anti-vaccinations, red, blue, I don't care. Are you ready? 2 + 2 = 4, only if you choose. Welcome, my friends, to Hodgepodge. Hey, did you know that Assad, the ruler of Syria, who just got overthrown, was an ophthalmologist? Fascinating. Medical doctor of the eye. After he got his degree, he decided to go into the family business. He's now in Russia. So I was thinking, do you think he's going to open an eye clinic in Russia? Anyway, folks, come on. It's time to go onto my farm. So, folks, when you're on my farm, this is something I want to put. You are now in charge. You are a third-generation farmer on a centennial farm, which is 100 years of a farm being in the same family. By the time it got to the third generation, you can no longer support your family on the farm. So you really either had to go to work and have a part-time farm, or you have to go big or go home. Here's the questions I'm going to give to you. Will you try genetically modified corn seed? that is resistant to an herbicide. What it does is they've been able to make corn resistant to a particular herbicide. Then they can go in and spray this corn, which it ends up in the corn, it ends up in the soil. But what it does is it kills all the weeds around the corn. So there's no competition for the corn. But then what ends up happening is because there's no competition from the corn really takes off. So you increase the yield, which makes more money for you. Are you going to do that? Or number two, how are you going to get this thing to the market? Switzerland just came out with a scientific study that said there are 14,000 different known chemicals just about in the process of food processing and getting it to the market. 3,600, just about that, almost 25% of those chemicals are found in the human body when you get them to the market. Are you going to do this? But wait, there's more. Now that you're getting it to the market, is it going to be cost effective? Are you actually going to make money? But not only that, is it going to be safe by the time it gets there? And then, is the price going to be good enough? So you decide that, you know what, you're tired of this, you're tired of spraying all these chemicals, you're going to become an organic farmer. Well, guess what? Your produce or what you're producing is a lot smaller and the yields are less. But that's great because it's organic. People may pay more. But then what they found is if you have an organic farm, the farms around you that aren't organic use more pesticides and herbicides. Isn't that fascinating? So now it's you. You need to make a living. What are you going to do? This is what we have to come up with. Can we bring our food, process it, ultra process it, make it sit, make it be healthy? Because every other month in this country, there's a recall. Have you noticed that? That it wasn't safe, that there was a problem in the processing. Oh yeah, one more thing. I had that corn and it was absolutely delicious. You would never know that it was sprayed with this herbicide. Now it's time to leave terra firma. It is time to shoot into space.
4, 3, 2, 1.
So you get to the International Space Station and you have to go to the bathroom. If you want to have a lot of fun with this, you really need to see what do astronauts do when they have to go to the bathroom. What does this have to do with tapping into uncomfortable or health? I told you that it is about human adaptability. For our bodies, number one, will do everything it can to stay alive. Then they want to make babies, and then we want to be comfortable, correct? But I also told you, so does all other life. What they found with microbes are unicellular bacteria organisms in space. They did some studies recently, and they came out and they said, hey, when those microbes, those bacteria in space, they've actually evolved and adapted while they were in space, just like the astronaut's body have. And what they found, which was really fascinating, is one of the genus and species of the bacteria in space evolved to become more antibiotic resistant. Isn't that amazing? Because this is Hodgepodge. It's very important to understand. My concern was when they would use the laboratory on the International Space Station, they were evacuating that into space. And Newton's law of inertia meant that that was going to keep going forever. I don't know, folks. I lost my mind, but we need a little bit more relaxation before we get into the next parts. And for the first time, you are in charge of another 4T's scientific experiment. I love dichotomy. I love things that are completely opposite of each other. I love paradoxes, but this I do not enjoy. There has been so much chaos with two things. Number one, was that man that was killed in the New York subway. And number 2 is the alleged shooter in the case of the CEO. And what I would love for you to do for the first time is to literally spend 10 minutes looking into Mr. Neely. He's the one that passed away in the subway. And then look at the alleged shooter. And what I want you to do is read about them. And what I want you to do is take the 4 T's of thoughts, toxins, trauma, and traits with generational thinking handed down to these people. And I want you to apply that to mental, social, physical, spiritual for these people. You will see how they ended up doing potentially what they were doing. So your first scientific experiment ever on tapping into uncomfortable is to look at it through that lens, and you'll be absolutely blown away by what you see. The last section of material here is going to be aha and oh no. Aha and oh no, these are the moments that can change the direction and trajectory of your life. Aha means you finally learned it. You chose not to have that 7th cigarette today. That was the one that caused the first abnormal cell in your lungs. Not to have your 30th serving of ultra-processed food today, because that was the one that pushed you to diabetes type 2. And an aha moment would be not to think or express that the murder of a healthcare CEO is okay. Because here's what happens when you have an oh no. Oh no, I'm sorry to tell you that you have lung cancer. Oh no, I'm sorry to tell you that diabetes type 2 has affected multiple systems throughout your body. And oh no, I'm sorry to tell you that you will be treated the same way you treated other people. Welcome to Tapping Into Uncomfortable. I hope some of that hits you really hard, because at some point, folks, it comes back to get you. So the new question and answer is, and I'm going to paraphrase from the last one, should we pass laws for health? We have laws for health, but should we be passing laws for how we eat? Check out this statistic. 23% of food stamps or SNAP program benefits are spent on ultra-processed food. That's right, folks. Our poor people are obese versus other poor people in other parts of the world. We need to do something. Forcing laws on how we should eat at the rate we're going with thoughts, toxins, trauma, and traits, mentally, physically, socially, and spiritually? I don't know, folks. I don't think it's going to change. But at this time, I have no answer. But I do know if we keep going the way we're going, I know that answer. All right. Last but not least, the final question of 2024. The question is, what happens when we stop caring? Y'all have a great 2024, and you will be hearing me in 2025. So as always, I want you to be happy. I want you to be healthy, and I want you to just be. This whole podcast is based on a book. Be on the lookout for 4 T's to a Better You, a blueprint for identifying and addressing the 4 causes of sickness. You'll be able to buy it just about everywhere.